Hello everyone. So good evening. Today there were a couple of technical faults, technical issues here because spotlight for everyone. Okay. Um, our Zoom account is actually linked to a person who's in Perth, Australia, and when I was trying to log in, it says that you need to get a verification code. So then he was sleeping at the time, so I sent a message. So had to make a quick fix in the meantime. But we were discussing about expectations and how they shatter. So it's a perfect example for how things are not working the way you want. So today, I want to talk about a few things that about the main purpose of Buddhism. Now, we meditate here a lot and we do a lot of things. We use meditation. So, understanding Buddhism has a few aspects. One is the more academic, trying to understand it academically. You could have just a theoretical thirst or need for knowing the doctrine of Buddhism in a more academic sense. If you are a philosophy major, or it could be more for a therapeutic need. We come and associate a religion to let go of certain stresses we have in our mind, or it could be for something which is much more deeper. My life is fine, I don't have major stresses or issues, but I'm looking for something. I might not know what exactly I'm looking for, but I know that I'm looking for something, and it might be directing me towards um, the blissful place, the enlightenment, nirvana, moksha, whatever you call it in different languages or different cultures. Having said that, when Buddha came up with this whole idea of enlightenment, it wasn't merely for therapeutic needs. Now, while therapeutic needs or associating Buddhism for therapy is particularly not bad, it's actually very good. It's like I always see that there's the petroleum industry, where I used to work in the petroleum industry, oil and gas, and the main use of petroleum industry is to get fuel and use it on our vehicles, on our engines, internal combustion engines. However, the biggest secondary use or the majority of the petroleum industry goes into the byproducts, the bitumen, the tar, and the plastic. In fact, I think we are more surrounded with plastic than gasoline per se. So, in a way, the biggest usage of petroleum industry is plastic around us, like in all applications, from your medical equipment to spoons, whatever, the computers. So, in a way, although the refining and the digging of petroleum was the main focus, it gave us plastic which we can use. And I think the same idea comes for yoga. When the yoga was initially found by the ancient sages 4,000 years ago, or we don't know when exactly it came out, they say 6,000 years ago, 4,000 years ago. If you look into certain conspiracy documentaries, they say that there used to be a civilization even before the last ice age, you know. So we don't know when it happened, but we see some of the old scriptures, especially in Yoga Sutra by Patanjali, one of the Vedic or the Hindu sages who lived prehistorically, or some of them. The main use of yoga wasn't to exercise, but what's left out of yoga now mostly, which is available, is the stretching exercise, which is completely nice, because yoga is a fantastic thing. I missed my yoga to this morning, but it's a very nice experience. So what I want to say is same goes to Buddhism. The fundamental idea of Buddhism is one thing, but we can use Buddhism for many other things. Personally, I did not subscribe to Buddhism because I had a therapeutic need, because I was always very happy, or I did not have an academic need because I was done with my academic stuff. Nobody wants to. When you think that you are done with your studies, you somehow get into higher education. So I was pursuing my PhD when I thought I'm not going to study after my first degree, and then I got into my MPhil, etc. So I did not have that need, but I was looking for something, and that's why this whole exercise is also called a path of a seeker. You're seeking for something. You might not know exactly what you're seeking for, but you know that you're seeking for something. So we have Buddhism in that sense also. So in that spirit, we were trying to understand what fear was yesterday, the last week, and we also saw that fear has an innate component, probably more linked to our deeper physiological requirements, which is more innate, or which is being passed down through DNA, hereditarily passed down from generation to generation. Or we have fears which are mostly acquired, culturally learned fears, acquired fears. So if we look at and if we try to analyze ourselves, and again, I told you the first day that this whole exercise is about trying to figure out who we are. Now, who we are or who am I is a very individual, unique question. It doesn't apply to it doesn't apply across the board to everyone equally, because who I am is a question that only I can answer, and I need to do the digging into myself. Now, having said that, we need to understand what are our innate looking fears or what are our more acquired sort of fears. And then we also looked at the fear versus the risk. While fear is a very psychological phenomena, risk is something that we can come up with a statistical number. There's a risk of something happening. There's a risk of rain coming down 40%, 30%. And there's a probability which can be calculated. They call it the probability density function. But fear does not directly relate to the probability or risk. It's a more of a psychological feeling. So some people have different phobias, which you can't talk them out of. People who are schizophrenic, sometimes they have fears. They live in a very their minds are very afraid. I feel very sorry for them, because they live in a lot of fear, and you can't rationalize them and say, well, you don't have to be afraid of that. And although we are again not clinically diagnosed as crazy, in some form we all have different fears for different things. And it doesn't it's not called a clinically diagnosed fear like schizophrenia or paranoia, but we are paranoid to a certain extent. So if you see, the key here is again trying to understand things separately. Fear and the real risk it something poses. The innate fear and the learned fear. And we also discussed about sensual pleasure and the ingredients for sensual pleasure. Kama and kama guna. Now I will be keep repeating that very important sentence. Sankappa rago purisassa kamo, which means karma or the sensual pleasure is not the image you see, it's not the sound you hear. Usually we think that sensual pleasure is listening to nice music, looking at nice images, smelling nice aroma, tasting nice tastes or comfort in our body. But what it says is that sensual pleasure, or what we call karma, is not that. Sensual pleasure is something made up in our activity called the existence or mind. While the sight you see, the sound you hear, they are just ingredients, kama guna, ingredients of sensual pleasure. And sensual pleasure is something else. I will also introduce another word. These words are actually coming from the Vedic knowledge system. So if you are familiar with old languages, old Indo-Aryan languages like Sanskrit, Pali, it might be familiar. So out of this Sanskrit, the stemming out languages are Hindi, which is spoken in India, bulk of India. In Sri Lanka, we speak Sinhala, which also has a lot of Sanskrit elements. Or languages like Urdu, which is spoken in Pakistan, Afghanistan. There's a language called Pashto in Peshawar, Pakistan. So you find these languages, and even in certain words like in certain languages like Tibetan language, languages in East Asia, I'm sure that you have heard of Zen Buddhism. Zen. So Zen comes, the word Zen, Japanese word Zen, comes from the word Chan, Chinese word Chan. And the fundamental root of Chan is a Sanskrit or Indo-Aryan word called Dhyana. We were just talking about different states of mind when we meditate. Dhyana, Dhyan or Jhan. So Jhan became Chan, Chan became Zen. So you find a lot of similarities in these languages. So the word I want to introduce you is called Viveka. Viveka literally means restfulness, rest. But Vivek, if you are into Bollywood movies in India, there used to be one very famous guy, probably Nihal remembers him, called Vivek Oberoi. Uh, was an old actor, old or young actor. I remember his name. So Vivek means restfulness. Now, one of the more, if you go into the etymology of the word, one of the deeper meanings of Vivek means separation. So rest, you go on a vacation, which is being restful. You're taking a rest, you're taking a break, which means you're separating work and your life. So that's Vivek. And the keyword used in Buddhism called Viveka or Chitta Viveka. Chitta means mind. You give rest to mind. But the secondary meaning of that is that you try to separate things out. You separate the sensual pleasure and the ingredients of sensual pleasure. You separate the innate fear versus the acquired fear. You separate the fear and the risk. So there's some separation. And more you try to separate things out, all you would find is mental clarity, right? And another important separation that we are trying to do is the difference between the physical world. Physical world is perceived through our perception, our five faculties, which is the eye, ear, nose, touch, etc. So we try to perceive the physical world through that, but then there's a whole other mental world around that. Now, a classic example, we see a statue of Buddha down here. So most of you might see a statue of Buddha, but for someone who hasn't ever seen a Buddha forever, it might look like another person, maybe a male person, right? So what we see is a Buddha. So you see, what we see should be the light coming from that, bouncing off that statue and getting into our retina, which all the way travels to the brain visual cortex. That should be the physical part. But what we see is not what we really see. We give meaning to that and we see a statue of Buddha. For some people, they might love Buddha, they might have a deeper devotion for Buddha. Some people even might hate Buddha. When they don't like Buddha, they might even hate them. For some, they might not even recognize. Now, when I go to the Cambridge Mall, some people come and ask me, what's this funny type of dress that you're wearing? So I have to explain that I'm a Buddhist monk. But very importantly, you see me and you see a Buddhist monk because you know that I'm a Buddhist monk. So what you're seeing is not what you're really seeing. It's what you know and what you think. So then our next viveka or our next separation is how we try to understand the physical world and the mental world. How do we separate those two? Another closer idea is that when we try to separate these things out, you would find a more real world and a fabricated world. Real and fabricated. I will introduce these two words. In fact, there's another word for fabricated. When we learn the more conceptual ideas of Buddhism, I will keep using the word fabricated. Fabrication is building something. So that's what we have been discussing, and what we have been discussing sort of gets linked to all what we are going to discuss in the future as well. By the way, if this Zoom disconnects after 40 minutes, I'll reconnect it and fix it back. Please bear with me for today. And then we also looked at why do we exist? What's our motivation? I keep on repeating the same thing because we really need to get to the bottom of it. So the motivation of being alive is simply, we sort of oversimplified it, that it's happiness and hope which keeps us alive. And when we look at the hope part, we also discussed the hope part of it, happiness and the hope part of it, expectation, hope, wish. We found that certain wishes, certain expectations are justifiable, certain expectations are not justifiable. For example, when I'm hungry, I go out to the pantry area and then I open the fridge. I do not expect an elephant to be inside. I expect food to be inside. So I'm just taking that example. When we do things, we have a motivation of why we do what we do. And these motivations are always, it cannot be anything. We don't want to expect anything. We only expect a certain set of things. Now, I want you to be aware of what you are expecting next time you know that you are expecting something. Now, when I say expecting, even from going out to the washroom, you expect the faucet to work, the toilet to flush. So that's your expectation. Just be aware of that. Don't change your life, don't do anything, just be aware of what your expectation, your motivation. And our general expectation is to be happy, be satisfied, pleasure ourselves. We have the desire, which is also sort of an expectation, hope category. And then we want to avoid suffering. Nobody likes to be in pain or be in uncomfortable situations. Now, very important thing, when I say suffering, we can never measure the physical reality of suffering. Because I used to do a lot of sports back in the day. When you do sports, your muscles get sore. It's hard work. You need to sweat. It's not comfortable physically, but you anyway do it because you're mentally satisfied doing that, right? I remember as a kid in the tropical heat, I would play cricket, and my cousin sisters, they don't want to go to the sun because that would make them darker. But the younger boys, the young children, they just play outside in this scorching sun, and it makes them happy. But physically, it should make you uncomfortable. Nobody wants to go in the heat and stay outside. Same thing goes to the cold as well. Young kids playing hockey on the field or skating around, in that freezing temperatures. It's not fun physically, but you anyway do that because it mentally rewards you. So we can't measure the suffering in a physical sense. So suffering would be you getting into situations where you don't want to be in. And enjoying is you getting into situations where you love to be in. Right? So now you understand, it is never measured physically. It's more on our fabricated world, on our mind-made world. And let me take the analogy of body and mind again. Now our body and mind is there. What do you think is the more intelligent part, the body or the mind? What do you think?
Say again.
What is the more intelligent part of our existence, the body or the mind?
Question. The body.
The body. Do you think that body is more intelligent than the mind, or mind is more intelligent than the body? What do you think? Any thoughts, Angie?
I was just thinking it's probably the mind.
Probably the mind, right? Intelligence is always associated with the mind. But let me tell you how our mind is so stupid and our body is so intelligent, right? Now, if we take our body, take this nail, the nail cell knows that it should be generating nail cells. It doesn't generate hair on the fingertip, right? And the hair knows that it should be generating hair, not nail cells. And each cells are fundamentally very similar. They have the same sort of DNA, but they have a very specific function and they know what to do. Unless we try to get involved and screw it up, like eating too much sugar and, or putting more alcohol in the body so the liver can't handle it. Unless if we do that, the bodies usually, they know what to do. Well, there are sometimes the body is not the most perfect. It has its malignant cells and all that, cancer, etc. But usually it knows what to do. Suppose that you go and touch a surface which is very hot. You touch it, the reaction of the body is to let it go. It's not your mind's reaction. Or if there's a pain, if there's a like something which is touching you, electricity, The natural involuntary reaction is to let go. Now, body, while knows what to do exactly, when the body is exposed to cold, it starts shivering because it has this natural reaction of trying to generate more heat. Or if it's in a situation where you need more oxygen, it will start inhaling and exhaling faster. So body has a perfect system of self-balancing itself. But mind is not like that. Now I'll quote you something which is really beautiful. It's in Pali language again. Tanhaya jayati soko, tanhaya jayati bayam, which means tanha. The word tanha means craving or clinging, right? It has many nuances, but we'll later see what are each nuances are. Tanha, tanhaya jayati soko means soko is fear or your sadness. Sadness or fear. Tanhaya jayati soko is the sadness. Tanhaya jayati bayang is the fear. So fear and the sadness is due to you're clinging on to certain things, right? Now that's why I say our mind is not so intelligent, but our body is very intelligent. When the body knows that it's not a desirable situation, body knows how to let go. But mind does not know how to let go. Trust me, I know this because I'm listening to all stories from different people. Now personally, I have never gone across such malady in my life. My life has been fairly nice, not because it was physically nice, because I knew how to let go of things. But I hear stories from morning to evening of how this girl is not treating me right, how this boy is not treating me right, how this child is making me feel bad. And they don't want to let go. And, so much misery in this world because our minds are not ready to let go. I just happened to meet someone whose husband died of cancer again a couple of weeks ago. Very sad, very miserable. And personally, if someone close to me dies, anyone, like I have a child, I have my parents, people that I hang out with, I don't think I will ever be sad because I know it's a complete natural process for people to die. Everyone knows that. Everyone here knows that. It's very perfectly natural. But although we know that, we simply can't let it go. We just can't let it go. So the body doesn't do that. When you hang on to something very hot, body doesn't cling on to that. It doesn't try to hold it infinitely. It knows how to let go. But the mind is not designed that way. Or at least mind is not trained that way. We can say it's not trained that way. Our natural inclination is to hang on to things and be sad about it. So I want to introduce you that part of our mind, and that's the nature of mind. At least that's the reality that we are facing with. So when we try to get into different states of mind, trying to understand the nature of mind, we might see that there's an alternative way to do things also, if when we try to understand our mind, right? Now again, let me tell you about the word understanding. Understanding is not a theoretical, philosophical, or a conceptual exercise, right? It's not at all trying to understand conceptually. Now when we meditate, I always put a lot of emphasis on the word. This is not a thinking exercise, it's an experiencing exercise. It's simply because if we have to learn swimming, we can understand what swimming is. We watch YouTube videos or join Zoom discussions, and then we learn swimming through Zoom, like what we are trying to learn Buddhism through Zoom now. Oh, right? So we learn swimming through Zoom, and then you are left in the middle of Pacific Ocean. You can't swim, right? So you would understand everything which you should know about swimming, the different strokes, different timings, the timing that Michael Phelps swam, the physics of it, how the buoyancy and your weight and density of water, how they are connected, what Archimedes have found out when he's at Eureka, the buoyancy. You would understand all that, what water is made of, H2O and the subatomic particles. You would know everything, but you can't swim. So the same thing applies here. it's nice to understand them conceptually. So right now what we are doing is we are trying to conceptually understand things. But when you experience things, that's a different type of learning. When you experience things, it happens in a much more uh, base level. One could say, isn't that another form of conceptual learning? So I will again use another word. Don't try to remember these words. There's a word called prajna. Prajna is directly translated to English as wisdom. But this prajna also has a very deep meaning. It is not simply understanding, because our understanding always happens on a conceptual layer. That's what we understand. But we have muscle memory. For example, we know how to hold a glass. We don't think about it and we have never understood it. We have just learned it when we were a kid, right? We know how to walk. In fact, when we do walking meditation, you'll be amazed to see how body remembers how to walk. It's an amazing machine, you know, because we usually don't pay attention to our walking or sitting or eating or talking for that matter. See how these words come out perfectly. The throat knows what sound to send exactly, and it's called muscle memory. So we also have a deeper um, sort of learning which is available. This is going to end in 10 minutes. Let me reconnect and rejoin. Okay, don't worry about it. So okay, so then having said that, we'll get to the main discussion today, which is the anger. So, in order to try to understand anger, we also need to know one more thing, that all this information, all this knowledge that we capture are through our five senses. And our five senses are not perfect. They have a operational range. Now, for example, I can see only, not I, me, but the I, EYE, the optical vision is only between infrared and ultraviolet. There's so much that we can't see where a bird or a dog can see. Our ear is between 20 to 20,000 hertz. Elephants can hear a lot more, dogs can hear a lot more, but we don't hear that. And our taste is limited to the amount of chemicals our receptors are attuned to. So our knowledge is very finite, it's very limited, and what we think the world is very limited based on that. The next part is that our world, or the world that we live in, is not really under our control. It's only under partial control of us. For example, classic case, I was trying to log into my Zoom, but out of all these days, today it said you need a verification code. See, it's only partially under my control. And we try to we quench our thirst by drinking water, but when will you be thirsty again is not really under our control. So there's a lot of things which we don't have full control of. I'm not saying that there's absolutely no control in this world. We only have a partial control. And the next important thing is there anything in this world which I can truly call it's mine? Is there anything? Like the monastery I live in. Yesterday we had hosted a big meeting, and one of the things I said to some people was that I'm only a temporary custodian here. And you are the same. You think that you own your car, you own your house. But you know, a few million years ago, it was the dinosaurs who owned that land, right? So we are just temporary custodians of everything that we call mine, right? It only takes a split second for you to for someone to change and hand over the title to someone else. So having said that, our anger is very much based on not understanding what I just said. So before we try to understand anger, I also want you to sort of tell you about this Kubler-Ross stages of grieving. 5 stages of grieving. If you don't know, I'll tell what it is. It's basically when you are faced with a traumatic incident or something that which traumatizes you. The first natural reaction would be to deny it. Now, back in the day, there was I'll take the latest case. So someone died 2 days ago, right? So I'm sorry for trying to explain all these bad stories, because that's what I hear, and that's when people are suffering the most. So someone died 2 days ago, and a friend called me from Norway. He said, well, there's a rumor saying this guy is dead. I can't believe that. So he was in denial, right? So then he asked me, would you have a number to check if he's really dead? So I called someone else, and then he's really dead, right? So then I also said, well, he's dead. And then naturally would come the classic stages of Kubler-Ross, stages of grieving. Anger. When you can't deny it anymore, when you know that it has truly happened, you try to find fault with someone. Is it the fault of the doctors? Is it the fault of the caretaker, the government? Whose fault is that? And then you sort of get into a bargaining, depression, and acceptance. So my main purpose is not to try to tell you the 5 stages of grieving, but when you are in denial and when you know that it's undeniable, it really has happened, the next thing is to become angry of someone, angry of something or someone. Now that's when the anger comes. So as a monk, I have to go to the death rituals of the Buddhist. It's called the Panchakula, where there's a ceremony where you transfer the merits to the dead ones. And I see, like, so that happens on the seventh day of the or it rather happens on the day where you are being buried. In all religions, you have this feature. In the in the in Islam, it's called janasa, where they bury someone within 24 hours. So they do that. The Hindus do that. The Christians do that. All religions, they do that. In fact, even the Neanderthals did that. 40,000 years ago, Neanderthals had death rituals. So it's very common. As a monk, I do the same thing. But what I notice is that when I go to these houses, on the first day, when the body is about to be buried or cremated, everyone is very sad. And then there's another event which happens after 3 months. It's sort of the 3 month, third month commemoration. By the third month, the surrounding is a little more festive. People are still crying a little bit, but not so much. And then there's a 12-month or a 1 year commemoration. By then, everyone is very chilled out. They have it's very festive. It's more festive. And then later on, every year you would find the remembrance each year. More and more years you go, you have sort of accepted it, and it's just a day of remembering them. Only for that day you might shed a little bit of tears, but most of the people are very happy. So I see the change of people, how people change over time in terms of the 5 stages of Kubler-Ross. So having said that, I also see in the beginning that many people, especially during the first few weeks, they are very angry when someone is dead. Whose fault is this? Whom should we sue? Whom should we find fault with? But if I suggest you that anger is nothing but a symptom, right? Anger is nothing but a symptom. So if anger is the symptom, what's the cause of it? Now that is what we are going to find out today quickly. I'll be also telling you a lot more from the Pali canon today and different words of Buddhist words. Now again, the name and the word is not so important. The idea is the most important thing. Whether we say it in Hebrew or Latin or Pali, Sanskrit, it doesn't matter. So there's a discussion which happened with Buddha. It's called the Salla Sutra. Sutta means a discussion or a part of a discussion which happened. And there's a website called Sutta Central. Sutta Central is where you have to go if you want to read the Pali canon. So it's in the Pali language and it's in the English language. Pali language doesn't have a font per se. It's written in English. It only has the phonetics and the words. So Sutta, Salla Sutta means a sharp knife or an arrow. So Salla Sutta says that a person who's sad usually is sad for two things. Or what it says is that if you're stuck if someone shoots an arrow at you, a person who hasn't really understands the works of the mind, you will be shot by two arrows instead of one arrow, right? So the first arrow is the physical arrow, the second arrow is the mental arrow. So there are two arrows that you get shot by, and you need to treat for two arrows now, right? But for someone who has understood, he will be only shot by one arrow, which is the physical arrow. Now, what does it say? Salasutta goes into saying that when someone is sad, the only way a person who hasn't understood the mind knows how to get over his sadness is to involve something which makes them happy. That's the only way you know how to get over your sadness. When you have a bad breakup, you go and eat ice cream. Very stereotypical. When you had a very rough day at work, you come home, listen to music, or go do meditation. So the only way we know how to get over sadness is through pleasure. It's like when we paint something, when you have too much red in it, you add blue. When you have blue too much, you add a little bit of yellow. So you only know how to patch up with your sadness from pleasure. That's the only way we know. And it also says that the pleasure. Okay, my Zoom just ended. I'll start this again. I'll start this again and give them a few. You were very quick, Nihal, to come back again. All right, we are all back.
Recording in progress.
All right, that was quick. Thank you for joining so quickly. That was quick. So Salasutta says that first thing is that in order to get over our sadness, the only way we know is to cover it up with pleasure. But pleasure is always based on desire. You can be happy by only interacting with something that you like. Last week we discussed the range of liking. So you have preferences. I like French vanilla over double double, and then I will only drink French vanilla, or I will only drink double double. I will reject French vanilla. I will be screaming very badly if I don't have my double double in the morning, right? Or my entire life revolves around double double. So these are the stages of our desire. So pleasure is always based on a desire. If we don't like something, we can't be happy associating that. In fact, you would understand by now, like and dislike are the same coin, two sides of it, right? It's two sides of the same coin. We can be only happy with associating a person, going to a place, a possession, or a pastime of something that we like. If we dislike it, we want to get away from it. We refuse that. If we like, we want to get attached to that. So you can't separate desire from pleasure. And we can't separate pleasure from sadness, because the only way we know up to now is how to get over our sadness is to cover it up with pleasure. But pleasure is naturally linked to desire. And desire has this expectation in it. When you say, I'm desirous, I love doing that, I like doing that, it naturally has that component of expectations. So this is what we have been discussing. Expectations are bound to be shattered sometimes, right? Shattered expectations, or expectations that we can't fulfill, that brings anger, that brings sadness. Now, do you see the cycle that we are trapped in? It's not rocket science, it's very simple. The Salla Sutta is very simple. When we are sad, the only way we know to get over that is to make ourselves happy, pleasure ourselves. Sensual pleasure is always linked with desire. Sankappa rago purisassa kamo. Kama, sensual pleasure, is nothing but a conceptual desire. So the desire is based on this thing called the expectation. Expectations are either it's like flipping a coin. Either it should be heads or it should be tails. Sometimes it's heads when it's a good day. Sometimes it's tails. That's how it works. And naturally, this way that we know how to get over sadness is fundamentally flawed. Right now, that is why we are trying to find if there's another way to do it. Right. That's why I think all of you are here today. And raga, I also use the word raga, sankappa ragu. Raga is the attraction for things that brings satisfaction. So you would find this word repeated again, raga, very very often. There's three words that you would find in Buddhism again: raga, dvesha, moha. Raga literally means desire. Dvesha means aversion. Moha means delusion. Now let's take the first two words, raga and dvesha. Raga is the attraction for things that brings you satisfaction. And when you can't get it, naturally, you'd be upset about it, you'd be angry about it, you'll be sad about it. So that is the dvesha. So dvesha could either mean your hatred, animosity, anger, or your fear, sadness. Now, does it connect how when we meditate what we are talking about? Um, we were just saying, ahang avero homi. Let me not be angry. May I be free of anger, animosity, hatred. May I be free of greed. So it revolves around the same concept. Raga is the attraction for things that makes me happy, satisfied, desire. Dvesha is the opposite of that. When I do not meet these conditions, I am naturally annoyed, angry, upset, sad, depressed, heartbroken. And the reason for that is called the delusion. Now we'll get into what delusion is at a later point, but this is the reason for these two outcomes or the symptoms. So when I said anger is nothing but a symptom, this is what I meant. We haven't still found out what exactly it is, but the only tool we have is to find this viveka or separation. We look at a painting, we try to understand the painting, the painter, and the paintbrush and the canvas. We try to separate things out. First, we try to separate the images. There's a house, there's a duck, there's a goose. We try to separate these things. We try to separate the colors. And then we try to separate the canvas and the painting, the painter, and the process of painting. Right? So that's what we are trying to do. A next quick thing I want to say about this anger is that whenever anger happens, we try to personalize it. We try to direct it to a person. Sometimes anger can be directed to a person, but sometimes you can't direct it to a person. Like when you walk, it happens when you walk in the dark and then you knock your pinky toe, right? Stubbed, knocked pinky toe, right? It's no one's fault. It's most of the time. But we usually want to find fault with someone who kept this box here. Right? That's what we would naturally say. Or if we have kids, we would say, how dare you keep your toys lying around here? So I stepped on that and that's why I got the pain. We try to divert our anger usually towards someone and personify it. Maybe it's a person, maybe it's an entity like the township, the municipality, or the government, a prime minister. Or if we cannot do any of the above, we try to self-hate. Right? So either we focus it to someone else or we start hating ourselves for that. Right? So we have that nature in anger. We always try to externalize anger and direct it to something, someone, be it animated or inanimated. I have seen a funny YouTube clip where a person smashes his monitor and the computer because probably it wasn't working. I'm sure that he diverted his entire anger to the keyboard, so he was smashing the keyboard, right? So that happens sometimes when our phone doesn't work. Sometimes when we are angry at someone else, we smash the phone, right? So you do that. So anger is always projected and externalized that way. And the reality is that what we need to understand is that we can also unpersonify this anger, and we can view it as just a causality. That's another alternative way of looking at it. There was a box. I knocked my pinky toe against it. It just happened that way. It's a causality, like how it rains. There was enough humidity in the air. It got condensed, and then it starts coming down. It's another causality. But we don't tend to look at that way. We tend to blame it on someone, be angry. Now, what I'm trying to say is that when we start looking at things or trying to realize things as nothing but just a causality, all of a sudden, I don't need to be angry at things. Not because I want to stay away from anger. I cannot be angry because it's just like sun coming up and sun going down. Suppose that if someone is so mad that the sun is setting every day, his life will be very, not very pleasurable. But if you can just look at it as a natural thing which happens, the disturbances, they are all part of it. Sometimes when we meditate also, we say that there's no disturbance in meditation because everything is a natural rhythm. It's part of the causality. When we look at things that way, there's no reason why we should be mad at things, be angry at things. And why? Because all these things belong to the second arrow, not the first arrow. The first arrow, let's say that when we are meditating, a big noise appears somewhere. Someone is playing some rock music, which makes us mad. No, meditating, because I have seen that people meditating in temples, when someone is doing something noisy, they just open their eyes and then they want to curse them and fry them with their looks, and they are doing the compassionate meditation, compassion meditation. It doesn't tally. Instead of doing that, if we look at this is just a causality, and the feeling that I have, the anger, is nothing but a fabricated feeling, which is not real. Why it is not real? All the angers that you had in your life ever, it does not exist right now. Maybe you are angry at me for some reason right now. If it's not the case, all the other angers were not there until I reminded you about it. Right? So these mental fabrications are nothing but waves on the ocean. They are there and then they are gone. And we can let them go. It's up to us to let them go. But we don't want to do that. We cling on to them, we hang on to them, and we do not let go. So let's try to upgrade ourselves from not being so intelligent to being an intelligent being. And the next part is that anger is nothing but a habit. We are creatures of habit. We spoke about B.F. Skinner's dog, Pavlov's dog. Now, behaviorologists, they were trying to look into different behavioral patterns of people, how conditions and responses are bonded together. You have a trigger, you have a stimulation, and then you have a response to that. Condition, response. Anger is nothing but that. It's another habit. When the causality is, when the ingredients are correct, your natural tendency is to be angry, right? But you don't understand. What we don't understand is that this setting is very much acquired, either culturally. There's very few innate angers. Most of the angers are cultural angers that we have learned through our parents, our people who have we've been associating in our early childhood, later on childhood. That's how we have developed these habits. So in Sri Lanka, there's this very nice cultural show which is a pageant. It usually happens on next month full moon day. So for 7 days there will be a huge pageant with relics of Buddha and a lot of music, drummers, flutes, elephants. They are carrying the sacred tooth relic and all that. So when I watch these pageants, how it usually happens is the climax is the elephant, the series of elephants who are carrying the relics of Buddha. So that's the climax of the pageant. The beginning is this guy who's going with a whip and then whipping it around, which makes a bang noise. So that's how he announces that the pageant is coming, right? So anger is the same way. Before anger, there's a there's a alarm or a noise saying, well, now we are going to get angry. It's our skill should be to identify if we are smart enough or if we are fast enough, if we have a trained mind to identify our anger before it appears. Right? This is the nice thing with habits. All our habits, we can be mindful of them even before they come out, even before they start. And another very interesting you might find is that if you know how to postpone it, you can postpone it. You can postpone anything. You can, some procrastinations are bad, but a good procrastination is procrastinating your anger. You can procrastinate your fear, you can procrastinate your anger, even your hunger, even your natural things that you think are physical of nature, even that can be procrastinated, right? Try to procrastinate your hunger. Now, I personally, most days I eat a single meal, like one meal a day, or two meals usually. And in the beginning, it has been like this for the last 15, 20 years. But I would remember when I was a kid, I was eating a lot, 3 meals a day or even more meals a day. So when I first got into this habit, um, staying without a meal at night is it's hard because you want to eat something, especially when you have a lot of stresses at work. You want to eat and satisfy yourself. As per Salla Sutta, that is the only way we know how to satisfy. But if you try to postpone this, you would realize that the hunger is not a bodily need. It's your endocrinological system saying, okay, this is the time to eat. Okay, your dopamine is low, eat, and I will get you more dopamine. Dopamine is the happy hormone. Cortisol is the more stress hormone. In order to suppress cortisol, you put some dopamine onto it, and that's how you are happy. How you become happy is by eating more, and eating sugar, eating salt, drinking beer. That's what will make you happier, dopamine, right? But when you understand that if you are mindful, if you are aware that you can also postpone these things, and when you postpone them for a single minute, they won't come up again, right? So in a way that you start getting a mastery over your body and your mind. But trust me, this mastery is also not permanent. It's not a permanent mastery, but you can get a sort of a mastery. Now the important thing is, if you are a creature of habit, right, we usually do not have a free will because we have certain conditions and we respond to those conditions like a dog or a reptile. That's what we do. Someone who doesn't have free will is called a slave, right? So in a way, we are slaves of our habits, of our conditions. And how these habits came to be, most of them are culturally acquired, learned habits. People say that it's some person dying, a funeral is a bad thing, so you feel sorry and you start crying at a funeral house. But who said that? What if they are really, leaving the earth and then going to a better place and they are enjoying it much more? We should be happy, we should throw a party for them. No one has usually taught us that way, except for some people in Africa. Whenever they die, they throw a massive party and they are very happy when someone is dead. Right? So they react differently. Maybe they lament over birth. I don't know. Um, so when our minds are tied down with these habits, we are slaves of something. But the more interesting thing is, if we are the slave, who's the master? Now that's the interesting thing to look at. If we are the slave, who's the master? What do you think? Who's the master? Jean? Who's the master? Unmute.
Oh, please say again.
If we are the slaves of our habits, who's the master?
We're also the master.
It's quite
Are
funny,
we
you know.
not?
Now that's a question to ponder. Is it God? Is it karma? Is it the universal physics, the rules? Who is the master? We know for sure that we are slaves because we are definitely slaves for anger. We don't have control over anger because when the conditions are set, the only thing we know is to become angry. But then if we are the slaves of anger, it's very interesting. We start understanding who the master is. Like Jean said, usually we can think in it should be us. It's not someone else's doing. It's mainly us. But let's try to really understand if it's really us. Now the Buddhist answer to that, it's not even you. It's not even someone else. Then who is it? We'll get into that question later. But in a very fundamental manner, we are creatures of habit. Anger is nothing but a habit, and anger is nothing but a symptom. But what's behind this symptom, what's in the middle of that, not in the bottom, in the middle, is our desire. Chanda Raga. Our desire makes us angry. Our desire wants us to, have certain things, wish for certain things. When our wishes don't come true, we are angry, we are mad. We have an ideal way that we want to live, which we sometimes find, sometimes we don't. So now this makes us mad, this makes us angry. Anger can be gone into different layers. Some people, I know another person who hates her own mother even to now for something. She's passed away, she has died long time ago, but she can still forgive that mother. I know a lot of people who have never forgotten other people for things that they have done. And I'll tell you something. One thing I'm really blessed with is that I do not have. Maybe there are haters who hate me, but I do not hate anyone. I'm not mad at anyone. It doesn't say that people have been very nice to me all the time. People have been very bad to me many times, especially when I was doing my business. Business world, people have different motivations, and sometimes I was also slightly trying to help society in a sort of a political manner. People don't like ideologies and they start hating you. But whoever who has done bad things, who have spread bad rumors, who have with words, deeds, or even thought, I simply have no hatred towards anyone. The reason is that when I sleep and I wake up, I forget. Now I've been very lucky with that. I can't hate people. I can be angry at a person for a small thing, for a small situation. I also remember when I was handling my business towards the end, I had to show people that I'm angry because my subordinates sometimes they don't believe me that I am angry, so I had to raise my voice. But one day I remember I was scolding one of my guys a lot, but inside I was very calm. I had to do it because I had to just give that message to the staff, but internally I was very calm. I absolutely had no hatred or anything towards him. I also remember a time where I did not have that. I was really mad. You would know that you start shivering and you are pumped up, but you can show that you are angry and not be angry. That's completely possible. So um, I'll also tell something which Carl Jung said, who's a famous psychologist, analytical psychology, the father of analytical psychology. Until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life and you will call it the fate. That's what he said. Until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life and you will call it fate. You'll call it fate, you'll call it God, you'll call it karma. What we need to understand is that let's start making things more available in our conscious mind. Our lives has been fairly unconscious. So let's try to bring in this component of consciousness, mindfulness, and then let's start to look at things differently. So I'm only skimming through certain subjects, and I don't know how much you understand what I'm trying to say. Again, there's no point of trying to understand these things conceptually. The most important thing is to get it into our muscle memory, not even muscle memory, the memory that DNA has. It's a whole different level of memory. We'll try to find that quality, and let me also call a word for that quality. That's called kusal. or merit. A rough translation is called merit. Merit in a way is a skill, because you are awarded a certificate of merit to appraise for a skill. So let's try to develop this skill, let's try to develop this kusal, and then let's try to seek what all these sages are trying to seek, which they say enlightenment is in this path. But in the meantime, if we don't want enlightenment in yoga sense, we still have the stretching exercise. So we have the therapeutic advantage of that. So the only reason we dig petroleum is not for gasoline. We use a lot of plastic also, which is perfectly fine. So let's do that. And that is about anger. Anger is a secondary symptom of one of the primary symptoms of desire. But desire is also not the root cause. There's a fundamental root cause behind that, and in the future let's try to figure out what this fundamental root cause is. But we have raga and dvesha, and I have also said sankappa rago purisassa kamo. Sensual pleasure is nothing but a conceptual desire. And we have raga, sensual pleasure and desire. Not meeting with those sensual pleasures, desires makes us unhappy, sad, afraid, annoyed. Dvesha, raga, dvesha. And in the future, let's try to figure out what is in the root of this, and that will be the next session. So we'll be meeting again next Thursday, and some of you might be coming for the long silent retreat, 3-day silent retreat, starting from Friday, Saturday, Sunday. And we do not have meditation on Thursday, next Thursday. It will be only the discussion. And that's updates from here. If you have any questions that you would like to ask me now, please ask. If you want to talk to me personally, you know how to get in touch with me. If you have any thing that you need to know, I'm available. And I need to reply Vincent for something that you asked. I will reply you in due course. Yes, Angie?
I just wanted to ask about the meditation. Like, can anybody join? Do you have to be experienced?
Oh no, anyone can join. Anyone can who has a mind can join. So
That's good. And like, I'm very much a beginner. Like, that would be okay. Is it easy to follow along?
that's completely fine, Angie, because it will have a guided component, and I will don't worry about it. There's no prerequisite. The only prerequisite is that you need to have a mind.
Perfect.
Yeah.
Thank you.
I hope you have the information about that. If you don't have the information, let me know the way that you get in touch with me. I'll send you the registration link, or you can find the registration link on www.bmmc.ca. That's the monastery website. It has a link for registration. And yeah, that's pretty much it. So let's find the root cause of fear, anger. Let's also find the root cause of our desire. That's the most important thing, the root cause of desire. And with that, I dearly wish all of you that may you live a fear-free, anger-free life, and may you attain the supreme bliss of Nibbana, and may you rest in peace. Not in the usual sense, they hate me when I say rest in peace, because that's something you say when someone is dead. But rest in peace while you are alive, while you are awake. And I wish you all the best. Good evening, and then we'll meet next Thursday.